Shalom and welcome to the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. We're continuing our work in Jeremiah chapter 10. We saw in our last video, verse 10, that the Lord, through Jeremiah, made this declaration that the Lord is the only true God, and at his wrath the nations quake, the world trembles, and the nations are unable to endure his indignation, because he's so different from all the other idols of the nations around them. And now in this verse here, he's going to make another statement, which is absolutely phenomenal. Let's go ahead and read the text as we get started. Ki dana temrun lachom elahaya di shamaya ve'arka la avadu yevadu me'archa umin tachut shamaya ele. Now, the first thing we need to notice about this verse is that you probably had a hard time with it. And I suspect you did, and I hope you did, because in some ways, because this verse is not Hebrew. This verse is in Aramaic. And it looks sort of similar, and yet sort of doesn't. So this is one that it's fun to throw at my students all of a sudden when they're reading along in Hebrew and they come across this word and they go, why am I having a hard time here? Well, this is why. This is the only verse outside of Ezra and verses in Ezra and Daniel and a couple words in the book of Genesis. This is the only complete verse like this in Aramaic in the Hebrew Bible, and certainly in the book of Jeremiah. Now, why did Jeremiah all of a sudden switch from Hebrew into Aramaic for this verse? Well, we'll come back to that at the end, and we'll talk about it. Let's go ahead and work through it. Now, I do not work as much in Aramaic as I've worked in Hebrew. So actually, if we really wanted to get a good analysis, we'd have to work through some of Dr. Scott Callahan's videos on the Daily Dose of Aramaic. And if you want to get your Aramaic into good shape and understand the differences between the two languages and the similarities, I would really encourage you to go to his Daily Dose of Aramaic website and consult that, sign up for it as well. And so I'd much prefer that he do this first instead of me, but we'll try and work through it as best we can. You're going to see some similarities. So we start off with this ki, and this is just like in our Hebrew. I'll make comparisons with our Hebrew here. So this is just like, and then dana is the word which is the equivalent of the Hebrew ze. It means this. So like this. So this is. Now, you almost probably recognize this one here. This looks like what we would call an imperfect, doesn't it? It's got a tau at the beginning. We would call this a paragogic nun at the end with the u sopformative, but this is actually the way the sopformative goes in Aramaic. So this is an imperfect. We would call it a cow, but in Aramaic, this is the basic stem or conjugation is called a pa'al. But it's about the equivalent of our kal. So thus, you plural, you will say to them. And this is like your 3MP, third masculine plural, suffix here. So something that we're similar to what we see in Hebrew. Now, elahaya. Now, one thing you'll learn about Aramaic, if you don't know it already, is that instead of having articles at the beginning of words, we will frequently have what we call a sort of a definiteness. It's actually called an emphatic aleph at the end, and that is the way we would call it. They would put the article. So instead of having ha at the beginning, you would have this aleph at the end, which makes this more emphatic or definite. So Elohe, this would be the gods. This is plural, and in this could be God or gods, but in this context, you're going to see it's clearly referring to the pagan gods. So it'd be the gods. Who, di, this is the relative pronoun. This is the equivalent of asher, which we used to seeing in Hebrew. So just a regular relative pronoun. The gods who, the heavens, we would be used to seeing shamayim or hashamayim. This is shamaya. So this is the heavens. You can see that there. And you can suspect what's going to come next. There's your sort of article here, your emphatic form here. And this isn't edits because you have a kaf at the end. But this is basically the Aramaic word for earth. The gods who the heavens and the earth did not. Now we're used to seeing lo in an Aramaic. It's la, but same consonants that we're used to seeing there. Now avdu, this looks like a perfect, and this is a perfect. We would call it a cow, a third common plural in the Hebrew, and it's basically a very similar sort of a form. So this is also a pu'al, so it's like a cow. Now we're used to translating this word to serve. To serve as a slave or something else, or to serve in some other way. It's sort of the equivalent. This is basically the equivalent of asa in Hebrew. So it would be more the idea of to make. You can see there's some semantic overlap between the two, but Aramaic doesn't use this word asa as much. They use this word over here for make. So this would be the gods who did not make the heavens and the earth. Okay, so that's who we're talking about here. Well, what about the gods who did not make the heavens and the earth? Now, do you recognize this word? You got a yod at the beginning, you got an u at the end. This would be an imperfect. This would be the equivalent, if this were in Hebrew, we would call it, not with this vowel pattern, obviously, but a yod at the beginning with the end, we'd call this an imperfect, and this would probably be a cow. And again, this is a pu'al, like we have up here, just your basic stem. Do you recognize the root avad, which means to perish? And what means the same thing in Aramaic, so that's what we have here. So the gods who did not make the heavens and the earth, they will perish from, there's our preposition, and there's our so-called article, or emphatic form. Now we would expect maybe to see the word earth, and it looks like it's not edits again, but this time we've got an ayin over here. We had a kof, and apparently both these forms are sort of the equivalent for edits in Hebrew. You do find this form meaning earth. You do find this form meaning earth as well. So it's not that terribly unusual to have that here. So they will perish from earth and from, that's pretty similar to what we see in Hebrew, and tahot, pretty similar to our preposition that we're used to seeing in Hebrew as well, meaning under, tahat, which means to be something under, and from under the heavens. So they will perish from the earth and from under the heavens. Oops, this should be right here, like that, the heavens. These. Now, one of the questions we're going to see in the translation is, what does the these refer to? Is it these heavens? You do find it right here after Shemaya. Or is it actually referring all the way back to the gods? These, the gods who did not make the heavens and the earth, they will perish from the earth and from under the heavens. These gods will perish. These are the very ones who are going to perish. And you're going to see a couple translations go in that direction. It's sort of ambiguous what to do with this Eli at the end. It can go either way. Well, that's for some of you, that may be your first introduction to a little bit of Aramaic. I would encourage you to go to Daily Dose of Aramaic and take a look at Dr. Callahan's work there. Let's look at a couple translations. We'll hide our work here and look at the New American Standard 2020 edition. This is what you shall say to them. This is what you will say to them. The gods that did not make the heavens and the earth will perish from the earth and from under these heavens. So they've taken the these going with heavens here. Pretty straightforward there. A little bit different is the New American Bible, Catholic version, Revised Edition. Thus you shall say of them. Again, the them may be referring to the gods here instead of to them with the New American Standard. I would think the New American Standard is saying the them is probably the nations, the gods of the other nations, which were referenced in verse 10. Of them, this could be reference to the nations as well, or maybe it's talking about the gods, speaking about them. I prefer the New American Standard there. But watch what they do here. The gods that did not make heaven and earth, let these perish from earth and from beneath heaven. Let these, so they're taking this imperfect over here, that's a pu'al, like our cow, but they're taking this as an imperfect, actually more in the jussive sense. Let these perish, and then picking up the these from the very end here. That's an interesting way of doing it. Most of the translations did not go in the direction of a jussive. Most of them have stayed more with the indicative, like they will perish. And just one more. the NIV. Tell them this, again referring to the nation. So I like that. These gods, oh, you see what they've done now? These gods, the gods who did it, these, so they put these all the way up here, these gods who did not make the heavens and the earth will perish from the earth and from under the heavens. So they've made it very clearly that the these refers back to the gods who have done all this. It's quite a statement. And now, again, let's go back to this question. Why do you think perhaps we find this one verse right in the midst of this incredible chapter of contrasting between the true God and the false gods, and then, boom, we find this verse, verse 11, in Aramaic? Well, the conclusion that many commentators have come to, and I would share that, is that Jeremiah is no longer making this declaration in the local language Hebrew, which the people of Judah spoke, because that's where he's ministering. But now it's like he's standing up with a loudspeaker, and he's speaking perhaps in front of the United Nations or some other global situation, and he wants this statement here to go out in the language that everybody in the Middle East, all the way over to Babylon, can understand. And let's make it very, very clear, because Aramaic was the language that everybody else spoke. Judean was a language that the people of Judah spoke, but they wouldn't necessarily, other nations wouldn't necessarily speak Judean. But Jeremiah wants everybody. It'd be like standing up today and yelling out in English, perhaps in many contexts, other parts of the world. That's the one language that today a lot of people would be familiar with, even if it's not their first language. And what are they going to say? The gods that did not make the heavens and the earth will perish, and from the earth and from under the heavens. That's the statement that Jeremiah wants everybody to hear, in contrast to the living God, who is the God of Israel. Wow, what a strong statement. Well, that was a lot of work. We'll go back into Hebrew next time, and we get a couple more verses to look at. So check back with us soon for the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. Shalom.